Yeah, I just want to read one paragraph. I sent Catherine Ingram mentioning that we'd be talking, and I simply invited her. I said, is there anything that you would advise that I ask Joanna about? And I even said, if you want to be on part of the call, you'd be welcome. And so she said, well, thank you much for that offer. You're always so generous and inclusive. I'm grateful for the amount of clear-eyed material you're posting. But alas, I have a Zoom board meeting at exactly the same time that you and Joanna will be talking.
Mm.
As far as a question that I could ask, the few questions that come to mind are probably inappropriate and contain within them the assumption of extinction. The last I knew of Joanna's work from a few years ago, she had the idea of a great turning as the third stage in her three-stage view. I hope that she's right, of course, but I see no signs of a great turning in a sustainable direction or even in a metaphorical or dharmic direction. The great turning that I see is into chaos that will lead to extinction. I see things getting darker in human behavior, more tribal, more desperate for those at the bottom, which will include most of us soon, while the rich hoard the last of the major resources. I see the ecosystems being poisoned at an exponential rate, the heat ever rising, the oceans dying. I see people going mad, even within this COVID phase, which from a later vantage point will look like the good old days. I see resource wars, great and small, coming in all directions, nations, cities, towns, villages, neighborhoods. I'm not counting on human nature to pull us together. Human nature is really what terrifies me most. That said, I think that there may be pockets of civility that hold out a bit longer. The board meeting, for example, that I'll be attending today is an organization working on emergency and resilience plans for our shire. Just playing for time, really. Any place that has carefully managed resources will probably be overrun by mobs who don't. This kind of mitigation is about all that's left for us to do, but it will not sustain. It may only extend the glide. All this said, I manage my attention and focus on the day's small joys. My only interest is in acceptance at this point, but that is still a work in progress. Love, Catherine.
Wow. Well, thank you for reading that to me. I have been, I've been, and coming out of the Buddhist, of course, she's in Buddhist practice as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yes, very much so.
With the understanding and experience of the self. And I have found it probably the most meaningful thing in Buddhism is the understanding of the self, which is there is no separate permanent self. And that once you allow yourself to let that in and experience it, which I did with incredible glee and joy, and foundational to me when it happened, which was about 46 years ago, or over about 50 years ago. It changed everything. And so that also made it easier for me, and with systems theory and Gaia theory.
Yes, exactly.
I find it just a natural thing to find growing a planet sense of self, a Gaian sense of self, and have worked toward that for the last 35 years with, the Council of All Beings and the deep time work and all the experiential work where we role play beings of vaster experience through time so that we can, and I've seen even before we got to doing that with our deep ecology work with John Seed and so forth, I have noticed that in the very early days, of the despair work. And you were around pretty early back then and
Yeah.
around Boston.
Yeah.
It must have been in the
Mid to late.
very early 80s, maybe even 80 itself.
Yeah. I don't think I
but it-
experienced you until about 85.
85. Well, and that's when I was in deep ecology with John Seed in Australia. And that was just, but even before then, I found that I was sort of struck, amazed that the people who had the courage to go into their anguish for the world, the despair, the outrage, and not numb it out, but walk into that grief and dread and anger. There was sometimes a shift in the sense of identity. And that sense of identity became almost coextensive with Earth.
Joanna, you have just put your finger on what Connie and I both consider the single most important thing related to just bringing everything together. Systems, deep ecology, indigeneity, the sense of a sense of self that includes a continuity with time, that the ancestors live in you, they speak to you in terms of how to be faithful to the future, to this descendants. This continuity of identity with time and continuity with identity with what I call the nested self, the greening of the self or the enlarging of the self or whatever you want to talk about it. But it's not so much the dissolving of the sense as it is the ecologicalizing or, whatever. So whereas the sense of self becomes one with ecology and one with evolution and time, and that in my experience,
and it's perfectly possible.
Yeah, it's more than possible. I think it's the key to facing extinction, even the possibility of extinction. Even if you don't want to grant that it's likely, just granting the possibility, being able to deal with personal death, death of expectations, death of worldviews, death of
wait a minute, you're not recording this, are you?
Just for my purposes, yes.
Good. I want it because what's being said now, I want to hear again. What you're now is you're speaking from inside me as well.
Yes. But that's the piece.
Is my greatest joy.
Yes.
That's why I am so happy to be alive now.
Yes. Well, that's why World as Lover, World as Self was so deeply meaningful to me, because I had already awakened to the whole universe story. I had been a student of Thomas Berry since the early 1988, and really a student of indigenous ways around the same time, 87 or so. But that sense of the expanded or the greening of the self, both with time and with space, and then how that also gives one fearlessness with regards to mortality and impermanence. And those two things, this expanded identity and the fearlessness around mortality and death, those two things are, in my opinion, and Connie's too, the most central pieces that when people get that, they can face the chaos of our times from a whole different place.
Oh, that's so good. Because that is what I experience. And it makes me such a happy cookie.
Yes.
It is such a fulfillment.
Yes, I completely agree.
It's the best thing.
It's the absolute wellspring of everything that gives me joy in being able to deal with the challenges of life, but from a place of relative equanimity, trust, and a passionate commitment to make as big a difference as I can wherever I can, but without the fear of anything, because I know that my larger self in time and space continues.
And what I feel too from this, because it's it makes me so glad to be alive now. I wouldn't miss this.
Yes.
If this is the last generation,
Yeah.
then I'm glad to be here.
Yes.
This is utmost. I feel so grateful to be alive now in this. And now here's someone I can say that to who really understands it.
Yes.
Because it's like a great harvesting.
Yes, it is. I feel this exact same way with you.
Oh,
And it was actually this line of thinking and feeling and sense of identity that was what made the shift for me a year and a half ago when Miriam and Trevor were talking about the possibility of getting pregnant. And I was filled with a lot of fear around that. And then I, in meditation, had this extraordinary breakthrough where this tsunami of trust just broke over top of me. And I started crying and crying and crying. And I realized that
that's
even
it.
if this, even if this is the last generation to have children, if Miriam is
That's
a part of the
okay.
last generations of mother, what a sacred, incredible, would I not want her to have that?
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Trust. That's something that is right at the core of life.
Yes. I consider trust in reality to be a secular way of saying faith in God. It's trusting what's inescapably real.
Oh, yeah.
And then I now see, now that Anjali is 8, or actually she's in 2 days, she'll be 9 months old. She was born on May 20th. I see the way that Miriam and Trevor's lives have been transformed because they have this biological, spiritual being to live for that's greater than themselves. And I see the joy and the contribution and the sensitivity and the generosity and compassion that was elemental in them prior, but now it's like fully flowered because of this baby. And neither one of them are in denial about the challenges. In fact, they're quite educated.
Still, the human family is still here. We can't just stop having babies because we see the end coming. No, we're going to be humans living as humans till the last.
Right.
And
I have, yeah, I have had some young men who call themselves anti-natalists, meaning that they believe it's immoral to bring children into the world today. And I've had some of them jump on me. And in fact, one person labeled me, well, he's just a pro-natalist. I had to look it up. I, oh, it's because I love my grandchild. Okay, then guilty as accused, Your Honor.
no, it's just that when we go, they're going to be gorgeous 1 and 2 year olds. You know, I mean,
Yes.
this is humanity. We're all ages.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And we would cease to be humanity if we said to ourselves, well, I figure this is the end, so we'll stop reproducing. No, we are reproducing species, and the lilies are with us to the end.
Yes.
We're family to the end.
What an incredible sacred honor to be alive at this time, at the end of the age of exuberance and the beginning of the great contraction, the great unraveling, and how to stay human and humane and generous and compassionate and service. I often say, and young people tend to find this pretty inspiring, that saints, sages, and heroes and sheroes are typically born in contracting, collapsing times, not in expanding times. And I think that we're seeing this already with some of the people who are stepping forward, not to save industrialism, but to be, in my tradition, Christian, Christ-like, to be a blessing to the future in ways that are sacrificial, knowing that the ship is going down, and yet we can still be divine, humanly divine in the process. Because I think there's a lot that we can do to collapse well, to collapse humanely, to be a blessing to our friends, our neighbors, our relatives, our family members, even in the midst of accelerating collapse of systems, of industrial systems that have never been sustainable.
To collapse well.
Yeah, how do we collapse well? How do we collapse compassionately and well? Yeah, well.
Yeah.
That's why language I'm using these days is not just post doom, but also post gloom and post hope. Like, what does it mean to be in action in a loving, compassionate, generous way without hope being the thing that motivates us to do that? I mean, I still like active hope, but there, the active part is qualifying.
It's a hope that we can all die well.
Yes.
That's the hope.
Oh, that's beautiful, Joanna. I love that. The hope that we can collapse well, that we can die well. That's beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's also a practical hope. Miriam, for example, understands all this, but she's specifically requested, and she didn't even need to request it, I'm totally there, of not reminding her on a weekly or monthly basis of this sort of large collapse stuff, because she's got a baby to attend to and wants to be so fully present to the possibilities of being the best mother she can be and to raise this child. And what I said to somebody just last week, I said, I honestly don't expect my now 9-month-old granddaughter to live to be the age of 20. And yet I'm going to do everything to my dying breath to ensure that she lives life fully and loves the life she lives until and my daughter and son-in-law too, until the Grim Reaper comes for us in whatever form that may be.
It makes me happy. I just feel that our making peace with this makes room for such fulfillment somehow, and such, well, the word that keeps coming to me is happiness. Not even just happy. So happy to have a chance to be with this beautiful planet after this long, long story for these millions of years in the human story. And now we get a chance to be here right at this climax or this ending. And can we take our gratitude and love for this planet and let it inform us to be as appropriate and just damn grateful. You know, when my husband, Fran, died, we had first a funeral and then we had a memorial service. And we loved telling and remembering and the stories and the music. And there was so much to celebrate. Well, we have so much to celebrate of our earth. I want us to make the most wonderful celebrations to thank for rivers, for mountains, for, you know, instead of feeling sorry for ourselves, instead of wallowing in self-pity and complaint. That's so tawdry.
You have just opened up a whole new door. I mean, your work and John Seed and others, but those in deep ecology and Connie's work, I fell in love with her when I read Green Space, Green Time, The Way of Science, because it had science-based rituals, these naturalist rituals. And you have just, in what you just shared in the last 4 or 5 minutes, opened up a whole new inquiry, a possibility that I want to pursue at some point in the pretty near future, which is who's interested in a conversation about celebrating our relationship to place, the planet, the bioregions, to celebrating our place in evolution, not from the sense of that we're going to continue forever, but from the very real sense that we probably won't, certainly most of us won't, and doing so with that sense of absolute celebrational joy. I mean, I can imagine tears of gratitude, not tears of fear.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
That's why I expect when I kick the bucket that people are going to gather around and tell stories about me and play this and relive that and have some good laughs and say lovely things. They're not going to complain about me. Well, why this fame for us?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we could remember too some of the great people, the great poets, the great musicians.
Yes.
And I want us to have festivals. I want us to go to just bays and inlets and the Sacramento River and the Mount Shasta and everything and say, glory be. Otherwise, we then we could become something worthwhile.
Yes, yes, yes. I love you so much, Joanna. You have been such a teacher, such a mentor, such a friend. Thank you.